In this video, I'll be sharing how I made this realistic sub-sandwich cake. I'll show you step by step on how to make all the fillings, add the details, plus putting it all together. This is quite an in-depth tutorial, so if you prefer watching without all the explanations, I have a time-lapse version of this cake on my channel, which I'll link above. If you're sticking around, I hope you enjoy the tutorial, and let's get started. I'm starting off with a 7-inch square vanilla cake, which I'll cut in half to create the top and bottom parts. I'm removing the caramelization and shaping each piece. For the bottom, I'm curving the edges and rounding it off. And then for the top, I'm making it slightly more curved. I've placed the two halves together and I'm just giving it a final overall shape that I'm happy with. To add more realism, I'm cutting one end straight as if it was a longer one that had been cut in half, which I never really see on these types of cakes. Now my sponges are shaped, I'm going to simple syrup them to keep them moist. If you're not sure what simple syrup is or how to use it, I'll link my video on all things simple syrup above. Once that has soaked in, I'm going to give them a crumb coat. This is just a layer of buttercream to lock in all the crumbs to the cake and to give you a nice smooth surface for your fondant to stick to. I'm going to pop this in the fridge to chill, and while it's setting up, I'm going to prepare all the fillings. There is a more in-depth tutorial of this on my channel which I'll link above, but I'm basically just airbrushing on yellow food colour and then green onto wafer paper, and while it's still damp I'm scrunching it up and then tearing it into assorted size strips to replicate the shredded lettuce. I'm using 3 colours to make the pepperoni. The main colour is a mix of red and a small amount of brown. I've also mixed up a slightly darker shade of this colour and also have a small amount of white. To create those specks of white that you see in the slices, we're going to marble them through the red. Roll out the main colour and top with thin sausages of white. Stack them up and then add a few more random white pieces around the outside. Roll the whole thing as one big sausage and then slice in half, adding these two pieces together side by side. Make sure you keep the fondant the same way. Repeat 3 or 4 more times until you're happy with the look. You can check this while slicing your fondant. Roll out the darker shade to about 2 mm thick and then attach to the outside. We can do this with just a little water on a clean brush. At this point you may want to pop it in the freezer for around 30 minutes so it keeps its shape when you slice it. I prefer not to do this as it can leave your fondant a little sticky as it returns to room temperature. I'm going to reshape them and then flatten them out a little more with a small rolling pin, giving them a bit more of a natural look. I'm also drying them on this bumpy foam drying mat. This is usually used for sugar paste leaves and flowers. This helps them dry a bit quicker and so that they aren't completely flat. To make the red onion slices, I'm using 2 colours. The first has a mix of purple and red in, and the other has a small amount of ivory in. I'm going to roll the ivory to about 8 mm thick and the purple red colour to about 3 mm thick. Using a little water, I'm going to stick them together and then cut them into strips. For more natural variation, I'm sticking some of the strips together and leaving some of them separate. I'm also varying the size and shape of them so they look like they come from different parts of a sliced onion. I've added some yellow food colour a little bit at a time to get the perfect sweet corn colour, and I'm just going to hand mould these into shape. Start off with a small ball and then flatten one end and 2 sides to achieve the sweet corn shape. I could add more detail, but as it's such a small part of the overall look, I'm happy that they won't look out of place. To cover the bread, I've added a little ivory food colour to my fondant, and I'm going to cover each piece separately and smooth it out. To help get a really nice clean line on the cut, I'm using a fondant smoother with a sharp right angle to really press the fondant up to the cake. I can then easily trim away any excess with a sharp knife. I then cover the top half and then I place them onto a piece of kitchen towel. This makes it a lot easier to move them around and to airbrush them. Before airbrushing, I add some lines around the sides and on top with this fondant shaping tool to make it look a bit more realistic. To make these look perfectly baked, I'm bringing out my airbrush again. This time I'm adding ivory and I'm spraying lightly all over and then concentrating some more colour on top. I'm avoiding the end that I want to look cut. I also decided to add some brown just to really deepen up that colour on top. For the sliced opened end, I'm using the fondant shaping tool again to create a texture similar to bread. I'm just gently tapping it enough just to create a dimpled effect. I'm going to quickly make 2 more fillings before I assemble, as I wanted these to be flexible so I can fold and position them without them cracking. For the cheese, I added a little yellow food colour to my fondant, rolled it out, cut it into a square and then divided it into 2 diagonally. For the ham, I'm using some pale pink with a little brown added in, and I'm rolling out oval pieces, trying to control the shape and keeping it the size and thickness of real ham. Now I have all my pieces made, it's time for the best part, assembly. All that hard work is about to come together. I've decided to place my sandwich onto a serving dish lined with kitchen towel for that on-the-go look. I'm carefully laying my sponge into the bottom, and I'm just going to add a little fresh buttercream on the top to help the lettuce stick. I'm going to add a nice even layer so it covers the whole sponge. Next, I add on the red onion, sweet corn and ham slices. Before I add any more, I'm going to paint some darker pieces onto the edges of the ham using brown food colour straight onto a clean brush. I then top with the pepperoni slices. At this point, I had completely forgotten to make some kind of sauce. I quickly melted some of the vanilla buttercream in the microwave until just runny and popped it into a squeezy bottle. When I drizzled it over the top, I was a little bit disappointed on how thin the lines were and felt it didn't really look like sauce, but most of it will be covered, so I added larger drips to the front and added on the cheese. To help keep the lid sit on securely, I cut some skewers to length and then position the top part in place. And that's my sub sandwich cake. I did make one final tweak as I was a little bit disappointed that I couldn't really see the pepperoni. I had one slice spare, so I cut this in half and added it to the front, which I think makes it look a lot better. There's only one thing left to do, and that's to slice it up. I will say it's a little bit tricky getting through the wafer paper lettuce, but we got there in the end. Well, if you made it all the way through this tutorial and through all the waffle, hats off to you. I hope you enjoyed it, and please do consider subscribing to my channel for more hints, tips, recipes and cake decorating ideas.